This is update for November 7, 2023, day 622 of the war and of the date update. Also catch up for November 5 and 6. I'm going to start with general topic and then I'm going to switch to the situation in Ukraine. So first, a little bit about Russia. Russian economy, Russian state budget are doing, I would say, excellent. They have huge revenues from sale of crude oil. Just to give you a sense of how well it's going, Russia collected 1.6 trillion in October from crude oil, and this is the second highest number recently, and the highest was only in April of 2022. When it was 1.8 trillion. So as you can see, things are doing great, and I would say they're actually going I would say, excellent. If you think that, in in April 2022, it was both natural gas and crude oil. Now Russia lives essentially off only crude oil. Natural gas is dead. The Gazprom, which is a state-run monopoly in Russia, is effectively bankrupt and just on accrual basis. Cash flow wise, it's probably going to get bankrupt if things continue, probably in 2025. But given that Russia doesn't have essentially much income from natural gas, this is outstanding results. As a result, the deficit, the state budget deficit shrunk to only 1.4 trillion. If you remember, at the beginning of the year, the deficit was just for the I think for first 3 or 4 months, it's like 3 trillion or something more. So it was a huge number. It was totally horrific. This high crude oil prices allow Russia to sort of catch up and improve finances, improve the, I would say, economic situation. It's obviously sort of superficial improvement because it's only thanks to all of this export money that allows Russia to sustain internal economy. It's basically not terribly productive internally, and always requires inflow of this sort of fresh energy from outside. Just to give you example how inefficient Russian economy is, Russia is actually placing orders, I think, to build tankers in China, and they don't want to do it in Russia because it's much more expensive. So to give you example, I think the magnitude of the numbers was like 1 billion Russian rubles in China, and the same tanker cost 2.5 billion rubles in Russia. So just to give you sort of comparison and example, Russia has many more natural resources. They cheaper energy. The cost of labor is very similar to China. So it's all basically bureaucratic inefficiency that essentially hikes everything 2 times, and that's why effectively Russia doesn't have industry, and let's say under current sort of paradigm, there's no chance it's going to have any kind of industry. So that's why it heavily relies on flow of export money that then basically goes to China, and China produces whatever is needed for Russia. That's basically a very simple sort of primitive, though, explanation of the Russian economy at high level. But the key point, the key takeaway, that things are going well for Russian economy, for Russian state budget, obviously, because that's a derivative of the situation in Russian economy, thanks to the high prices for crude oil, which are a result of absolutely misguided policies in the West, Western governments that are effectively subsidizing Russian economy with their economic policies and fight against the conventional energy. And as I said before, it will become more and more clear that alternative energy is essentially no replacement for conventional, and actually will be bankrupt and will be huge liability and problem. And I think the first signs of that are starting to pop up in the West. Now I'm going to switch to actual situation in Ukraine, because things are developing in sort of on the negative scenario. If I mentioned several times that Ukraine will eventually face 1917 moment, and while I wouldn't say it was 1917 moment, but it was sort of prelude to 1917 moment yesterday, when the aide and close friend of the head of Ukrainian army was killed. If for those who sort of don't follow the news, basically Ukrainian political leadership, Ukrainian president is painting one picture to the West, stating everything is going according to plan, everything's great, we can win, no problem, just keep us giving money. The Ukrainian military had, basically painted completely a very bleak picture, stating it's a stalemate. And I made a comment that it's actually not stalemate; it's very slow loss of Ukraine. So as a result, shortly after that article, his aide, and I want to stress close friend, was killed. And the way it was presented by sort of official government authorities, which is Ukrainian equivalent of KGB, it's called SBU, stating, and also police stating, oh well, it was this person who is a major, that he was just carelessly playing with hand grenades. And as you can imagine, someone who is a major, who is, I would say, spent probably 15 years in the military, you would think that a person like that would not be careless in playing with hand grenade at his home. So that's a sort of official government narrative, and by that I mean that that's all of this bureaucratic organs are basically captive of Ukrainian president, and so basically they pushing this completely nonsense narrative of like he was careless and just playing with hand grenades. Even Ukrainian president put his talking head from the parliament to also push this narrative. At the same time, head of Ukrainian military, whose aide this person was, stated no, it was a murder. So essentially, there is a clash. It's becoming more and more obvious that there is a rift and there is a clash, as I said, between the two sides. The Ukrainian head of Ukrainian military and Ukrainian president. There is another sort of third, I would say, person in this equation, and I spoke about this person. His name is Arestovich. He was advisor to Ukrainian president. He has there is a strong indication that he at least used to work for Russian KGB, or at least has some, could be agent of Russian KGB and so on. And the more interesting part is that it seems that the head of Ukrainian military is sort of siding with this person Arestovich, who actually fled Ukraine, and stating that he's going to run for president. He has basically his he put his sort of basic like a proposal, what he's offering, sort of political proposal for the for Ukraine, and the whole point of that is capitulation. So basically, like I would say the best equivalent, I would say, I wouldn't say it's not perfect equivalent, but the closest equivalent would be like Vichy in France during World War II. So this is kind of what that person is proposing, and so it's, as I said, there is this apparently antagonistic relationship between two factions. From a perspective of Ukraine, actually independence of Ukraine and actually winning this war and being able to keep its independence, neither party is in interest of Ukraine. Neither president, as I said, he is surrounded by all of the people who have strong ties to Russia, strong ties to Russian intelligence and KGB and so on. Especially his right, left, and all other hands. His name is Yermak. It's just that person is, I would say, it's hard not to believe that person is not Russian agent, and also the Ukrainian president surrounded himself by all sorts of people from Yanukovych, who was a Ukrainian president, who was basically kicked out by the popular uprising in 2014, and he effectively was Russia's KGB puppet installed in Ukraine, just to explain how bad it was that this puppet installed Minister of Defense, who is a Russian citizen and who is basically worked for Russian KGB, and I think some other key ministers were also in similar situations. So all these people, they sort of basically working for Ukrainian president, which makes you believe that there's, if everybody around him like that, it's strange that he would not be the same. So it's unclear what's sort of this could be just a fight between two groups that just simply fight for power and for money, obviously, because there's a large amount of money that's coming from the West, and it's obviously, there is a lot of corruption, let's put it this way. So again, it's I wouldn't say it's a sort of true 1917, but I think the situation is becoming slowly but surely exploding inside of Ukraine, and this creates this tension within even groups that don't really have sort of natural sort of opposing political views. It's just simply the internal dogfight between one group versus another, and none of them has interest of Ukrainian interest in mind, really. But in any case, this is the first sign that there are cracks inside of Ukraine, and it's becoming, I would say, explosive and potentially dangerous. Now let me switch to the situation on the battleground, and I'm gonna walk through in a clockwise fashion, as I always do, starting from very north. Situation along the state border remains the same. No sort of special activity there. Now let's jump to North Luhansk front line. Things here remain more or less the same. Russian forces continuing their tactical attacks with the direction towards Kupiansk, as you can see. So far, they've been kept at bay by Ukrainian forces. And again, this is not a major offensive. There's the stories of like 150,000 Russian troops here. It's all false information. It's not a major sort of area of operational focus for the Russian military command. It's just more like a distraction to keep Ukrainian forces stretched and keep these resources here, so Ukrainian military command does not bring those resources towards more important areas such as Avdiivka. Now let's move to the North Donbass front line. Northern sector is completely quiet. Just sort of basically occasional skirmishes at there. There's nothing really happening. The southern one is essentially fairly weak, small-scale Russian attacks to recapture lost ground without really much success here. Now let's look at central Donbass front line. This is where the most of the action right now is from the Russian, sort of driven by the Russian side, where there is, I would say, Russian initiative is there. So the pressure around Avdiivka continues. There's basically right now the pressure kind of like sort of subsided, but it's very clear that Russian command is accumulating new large amount of resources to have major sort of another major wave of attack. So basically, right now it's just keeping Ukrainian forces sort of tied up here, and then in preparation and preparing for the next wave of attack here. So far, situation was stabilized thanks to this 47th Brigade, which was brought from Zaporizhya front line. And as I said before, this is thanks to sort of better quality and better motivation of soldiers there. Things did not really collapse, but otherwise, the quality is of the soldiers and motivation is declining noticeably, I would say, on the Ukrainian side. And I would say on the Russian side, they were never sort of extremely high, but sort of it was balancing in some ways all of the advantages that the Russian military has. It was balanced by stronger fighting spirit and stronger motivation among Ukrainian soldiers, and now that advantage slowly but surely is going down. It's obviously nearly impossible to quantify. It could be sort of more described qualitatively, but it's definitely significantly down, let's put this way. Now let's, and then also there are sort of typical attacks against Marinka that sort of end up in nowhere. This is the situation with the initial phase of attacks. This was latest one on the November 4th. So far, Russian troops were not able to expand this bridgehead that they captured on the other side of the railroad. So in some ways, railroad kind of acts is sort of like a river in conceptual. It's obviously primitivization, but essentially it's a barrier, and it was a pretty good defensive position for Ukrainian forces, and unfortunately Russian troops managed to get across it, but they are so far kept at bay. But as I said, the Russian command is preparing resources for the next large attack. Now let's move to the Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet. As I mentioned before, there are some Russian, I would even call destruction attacks, very small scale. Here, south of Rozhaine, with basically idea of keeping Ukrainian troops tied up in this area. Then let's actually move to the front line across along the Dnipro River. Things here actually happening. There are news here. Let's say positive developments for Ukrainian side. So Ukrainian forces start actually expanding this bridgehead near Krynky. This is the village Krynky here. So it's impossible to know exact front line here, but basically Ukrainian troops are slowly moving into this forest across from Krynky. It's unclear where they are, where the Russian troops are, but it's very clear that this bridgehead is alive and being expanded. Also, Ukrainian troops are bringing now heavier equipment, not tanks, but IFVs mostly, to basically to continue expanding this bridgehead. So again, this is not sort of ideal way of how it's being done, but it's being done. It's and so far it's working for Ukrainian side. One of the main reasons why it's working, because there is actually pretty good artillery support from the other side. So essentially, you have like a, call it like iron curtain, that prevents Russian troops and forces from being able to destroy this bridgehead. And by iron curtain, I mean the curtain made from artillery shells that essentially protects this bridgehead. And because, as I mentioned before, Ukraine has advantage in artillery over Russian side, thanks to artillery pieces that Ukraine got from the West. This actually works, and it's being done, I would say, right in this case. In this case, maybe not sort of perfectly, could be done better, but at least it's done sort of in better way, and it's working actually for Ukrainian side. So we'll see how things are developing. It's obviously creating problem for the Russian military command. So there could be some major attack to wipe this out. But so far it's growing in size. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.